There we go. All right. So before we go any further, a couple things, couple of reminders really quickly. A couple of people emailed me and said when they got that email from the College Board about the AP exam schedule, there was nothing on there about AP seminar. That is correct. Because remember, there is no exam day like time for AP seminar. We're just uploading those two files. So AP seminar would not have been included as part of that email. Now, if you have no idea what email I'm talking about, you need to take a second at some point and log into your College Board account. Log into whichever email address you've registered with the College Board. So whichever one you used to log in to get your AP scores last year, whichever one, if you registered for an SAT, whichever one you used for that, you need to log into that email account and look back to April 13th. That's when they sent this message. All it is doing is it's asking you to confirm. It'll say, these are the AP classes that you're currently registered for. These are the days and times of your exam. And then you just click, yes, I agree, or no, there's a problem or something. Do make sure that you take a minute and go log into that email account at some point and just say, yes, you are confirming that you're taking all those exams. It's not, if you miss it or you didn't get the email, don't worry about it. It's not a be all end all. You're still registered for those tests, but it's just a way for you to confirm that they have you registered for the correct exams. Because if there's a problem, you want to make sure that you give yourself time to contact them, because exams are starting anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks from now. So if they don't have you registered properly, or maybe instead of AP Lang, they accidentally have you registered to take AP Lit, let's say. Okay, you want to realize that sooner rather than later, so that the day before the test, when you get sent your admission ticket, virtual admission ticket, that you don't realize that you're taking the wrong test, and then suddenly you don't have time to fix it. So try to work on that. Try to check that sooner rather than later, okay? All right, next thing. What kind of questions do you guys have about IRRs, about anything that you're working on right now? Remember that for this week, the two tasks are, one is that outline. You choose one of the 4 that you want to use. And then the other one is just to continue working on editing and revising your own paper. You don't have to do any peer edits anymore. Okay, you've done that for three weeks now. Now you should be working on looking at the suggestions that you've been given and making changes to your own paper. So what questions do you have right now that I can answer for you? None at all? David, you usually have a couple of questions. Nothing? No? Okay.
I think I have a question.
Go for it, Milo.
Okay. So I was editing my paper earlier today based on like the format they have with the 4 different ways to do it.
Sure.
It's not really much of a question, it's more of just a comment, so to say.
Okay.
The way that I've structured my essay is I have the problem, and then within my paragraphs, I explain out the problem and why it's a problem. And then in the last paragraph, I have the solution to it. Now, how some people have done their essays is they've strictly focused on like lenses for each paragraph. So say paragraph A is focused on the scientific lens.
Right.
I'm kind of not really doing that, and I'm kind of focusing on the problem, and then there's different lenses within paragraphs.
Okay.
Is it okay to have that kind of system going?
Yeah, I mean, there's, at the end of the day, there is no definite format that you have to follow. Everything that I've given you is just suggestions to make it easy for you. But at the end of the day, this is your research paper, and so you can structure it any way that you want to. The College Board, when they sit down to score these, they're going to be looking for certain things, but they're not looking for that you followed a specific format. So it's not like the FSA, where they're going to sit down and they're going to say, is there an introductory paragraph? Are there 3 body paragraphs? Is there a conclusion? Okay, it's not as structured as that. The writing that you're doing is a little bit more independent here. Okay, and so you have a little bit more freedom in how you want to write and how you want to structure this. Everything that I've given you is merely suggestions. Now, what is not a suggestion is making sure that you have everything on that rubric. Okay, so as long as you're doing everything that the rubric says that you should be doing, how you organize it, the order of it doesn't matter. Obviously, make sure that it flows and that it's logical. You don't want to start the essay off, for example, with a counterclaim before you've given your own claim, right? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, but as long as everything on that rubric is there, you can still receive the points for it. There's nothing on the rubric that says it has to be done in this order or has to follow this particular format. Everything I've given you is just a suggestion. Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Who else has a question for me? Nobody has any other questions? Okay, so let me show you what I want to share with you today. There's 3 quick things I want to share with you on this call today that I think will help you. 2 of them are links that I'm going to post, and the other one is a file that I'll post as well. But let me start with the 2 links. So a lot of you are asking me, or are trying to in your papers, and it's good. Whoops. Many of you are working on trying to sound academic. Can you guys see my screen right now? Yes, right?
I see you.
You see me. Okay, let's fix that. There we go. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. So I found 2 very helpful links yesterday for phrases and things that you can use to make your paper more academic. Things that you can use that are pulled from a lot of university research papers, phrases that signal certain things. These are absolutely things that you're going to want to pepper throughout your paper, okay? Because it's a good signal word or good signal phrase for the readers as to what you are about to do. And so this first one, okay, when you want to talk about what the findings of research are, as you can see, there's a whole list of phrases here that you can use. Okay, pick whichever one or ones you like better. But these will be good phrases to kind of indicate what your results were. Okay, if you're comparing your results to a prior study or comparing one study to another, here's a whole list of phrases that can help you with that. A really important one and a really big one for you guys is going to be this third one, which is talking about limitations. And so here's a whole list of phrases that you can use to kind of introduce what the limitations are, okay? If you're making a small argument, what they call a casual argument, okay? Here's how you can refute those. If you're going to speculate, okay, here are a list of different phrases you can use for speculating. And then deductive arguments, okay? So this is the first one. I will again post the link to this. The second one, okay, I like this one too, okay, because this one's a little bit longer and it gives you topics that I think are very much related to your writing. So if you want to explain why your topic is important for society, which is something that most of you are doing, okay, here's a whole list of phrases to introduce that. Okay, explain why this topic is important today, or why this topic was important, because of a specific event. Okay, why this topic is important for your discipline or your area of study. Okay, I mean, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but on this page, if you click the main topic, okay, it'll then open up underneath it a whole list of phrases that you can do. So if you're talking about why previous research has been inadequate. If you want to talk about what the focus, the aim, or the argument of your paper is, okay, even though you're writing 2,200 words maximum, that's still considered a short paper. So that would be something that you would want to use. What the purpose of your research is, that's something that'll come up in your paper, okay? We talk about gaps within the research, okay? That's something that you'll want to take a look at. Let's see, limitations again, okay? You know, that's a big part of your research, is what limitations are, okay? So this second link gives you a list of general topics, and then when you click on it, it gives you specific words and phrases that you can use to kind of signal those things in your writing. So I'm going to post links to both of those online after we're done today. Okay, here comes Stephen Crockett. And then the third thing that I want to show you, the last one, okay, it's kind of the main thing that I want to talk about this morning, and that's incorporating evidence. Okay, now this is something, I didn't type this myself. This is something that I got at a webinar that I sat through last week, and I learned some new information there that I think is rather helpful to you. The biggest thing that I learned, okay, is what's down here at the bottom of the first page, which is that when your paper is read, the very first thing that they're going to look at, that they're going to check, are your works cited page, your reference page, your bibliography page. That's going to be the very first thing that the readers look at. Okay, because that's how they're going to check the quality of your evidence, as well as the range of the evidence. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, here's what they're looking for. Okay, scores that are, you know, IRRs that generally receive very high scores. Okay, they're looking for sources like these. Okay, basically they are looking for the majority of your sources to come from a peer-reviewed source. Now, if you're using any of those journal sites like EBSCO or JSTOR, okay, those are all going to be peer reviewed for the most part. Just make sure you check that box when you search, okay? But they are looking for peer-reviewed journals here. Okay, the papers that scored lower are using sources like these. Notice that these sources are all credible, okay? The New York Times is a credible source. NBC News is a credible source. So it's not that these are sources that aren't credible. It's just that these are not academic, okay? And so you want to make very sure that the vast majority of your sources come from peer-reviewed academic sources. And this is something that comes directly from one of the readers, okay? So don't think that because you're using the New York Times a lot, that you know that's going to help you get a high score. Yes, it is a credible source, but again, it's not peer reviewed, okay? The people writing those articles are not experts, they are journalists. So for example, the people writing articles in the New York Times about the coronavirus, okay, they're not scientists by and large. They are reporters reporting on the work of other scientists, okay? You would instead want to go, you know, if you want information about the coronavirus written by an expert, you would go to, say, the Journal of Infectious Diseases. That's a scientific source that's been peer reviewed, okay, about that particular topic. So just because a source is credible doesn't mean that it's, you know, going to earn you a high score. You really want to make sure that the vast majority of your work is leaning towards these peer-reviewed sources. Okay, so that was the biggest takeaway that I pulled from this webinar. Now, some other things that I want to go over with you that came out of this particular webinar. Okay, so when you're talking about credibility of your sources, okay, here's a couple of quick questions for you to ask about whether a source is credible. Again, I don't think you have to spend a whole lot of time on this. I think you can look at where the article is from, and that will help you determine credibility. Anything that comes out of those scientific journals that's been peer reviewed, you know right off the top that it's going to be credible. Okay, if it's a peer reviewed article, and it has been published, that means that it's credible. Now, that does not mean that you have to agree with the findings. Okay, and that's, I think, something that a lot of students struggle with too. You can find a credible source and you can find a peer reviewed source, and you're not going to agree with what their findings are, and that's okay. Okay, just because something has been peer reviewed and has been published doesn't mean that that's the truth, that that's the be all end all. Okay, you can still refute something that comes out of a peer reviewed article. Academics do it all the time, college professors do it all the time. This is how research evolves and research changes. Somebody publishes an article and then somebody else says that doesn't seem right. They go, they do their own research and they reach a different conclusion. This happens all of the time. So just because something is in a peer-reviewed article doesn't mean that you have to accept it as being the 100% answer. Doesn't mean you have to change your thesis to fit what this one particular journal says, okay? It does mean that it's credible, and that's okay, okay? Then, so don't spend too much time on this first part here about credibility if you're looking at things out of an academic journal. Now, the middle one here about relevancy, okay? These are the questions that you really have to ask yourself, okay? Because this is, yes, the information here might be credible, but does it really relate to what I'm talking about or what you're talking about in your essay? And so like it says here, this first bullet point, the evidence might be 100% accurate, but it could be worthless to you because it doesn't relate to your claim. If it doesn't relate to your claim, okay, it doesn't matter how accurate, how peer-reviewed, how credible it is. Okay, you really want to ask yourself, does this source relate to my claim, to what I'm talking about in my paper? And then if it is relevant, then you move on to the second bullet point, which is you need to make sure that you can explain in the body of your report how it relates to your claim. Okay, if you can't answer this second question, then you need to go back to number one, because that means it doesn't actually relate to your claim. All right. And then the third one is about sufficiency. Does it provide enough evidence? This is one I think a lot of you, based on reading your drafts, a lot of you are struggling with right now, which is that you find one piece of evidence that supports a claim that you make, and then you don't find any additional evidence, okay? You need to try to shy away from only having one one bit of support for your claim, okay? And so that gets into the argument about sufficiency, okay? If you can find one study to support what you say, all right, but you're gonna have a lot of people poking holes in it. Your argument becomes much stronger if you can find 3 or 4 other studies that are basically saying the same thing, that are confirming your conclusions. That makes the evidence much, much stronger, okay? And it gives you a whole lot more evidence in terms of the total amount of the evidence, okay? It'll also make your explanation a lot more convincing, okay? So again, with this one, you want to avoid having just one article or one study or one whatever to support your argument, okay? Now, obviously, there is no one right answer as to how many is enough. I know a lot of you ask me all the time, is 3 pieces of evidence enough? Is 2, is 5, okay? I can't give you a definite answer for that. It really depends on what your argument is and how you have to support your argument. So there is no right answer for that, okay? And then, all right, we talked about that. And then moving towards the end, when you're developing that argument, okay, remember that it should always be used for your claims, okay? Don't just get into the trap of sort of summarizing academic studies and academic journals, okay, and these articles. You need to make sure that you can relate it back to your claim. And that's really what the second bullet point is saying, which is that you need to be very blunt and very blatant and extremely explicit about how the evidence relates to your argument, okay? There were a few papers that I've read where they are introducing evidence, and I think the evidence is good evidence, but the author doesn't really explain how it ties back to the claim that they're trying to make, okay? And that's something that you really need to be very, very explicit about, okay? You need to make sure that your evidence and that you explain to the reader how the evidence functions within the context of your argument. So great, you found a study that says that people under the age of 30 use social media much more than people over the age of 60. Okay, and I'm just making that up. Okay, great. How does that evidence relate to your argument? What does that, how does that help me understand, or how does that strengthen the argument that you're making about happiness, let's say? Okay, so you need to be very clear, okay, when you are developing arguments about explaining how the evidence functions within your own argument. Okay, and so again, with this one here, it's that second bullet point that's going to be the most important. And that kind of leads you right into this part here about commentary. Okay, the commentary is how you do that. So this second bullet point here about explaining how the evidence functions within your argument, that bridges you and takes you right to the commentary. Okay, and like it says here, that's the so what, why does this matter piece. Okay, this is when you tell me, again, explicitly how it connects to your claim or to your purpose. Okay, and then like it says here with the third bullet point, this is what's going to move you on that rubric. So this is what's going to take you from simply summarizing a bunch of articles to explaining to me how the evidence relates back to your argument. Okay, and so if you look at what this reader said, right, in a low scoring paper, there isn't a lot of commentary. The commentary is sort of implied, meaning that they're presenting all of this evidence, but they're not explaining to me what it means. They're only summarizing, okay? Their connections are minimal. And then this last one, which I think is important too, they're treating all evidence as being equal. Be very careful with that. An article that you found in the New York Times, again, credible source, but that article should not have as much weight in your paper as a study that you found in the New England Journal of Medicine, okay? That peer-reviewed study should carry more weight than that New York Times article. And that New York Times article should carry more weight than something that you found on Wikipedia, okay? So do not treat all of your evidence as being equal, okay? And then if you look at what a higher scoring paper does, okay, obviously there is a clear link between the evidence and the claims, okay? This, I think, for many of you, and I think really for anybody, that's the hardest thing for people to do. You cannot assume that the evidence just speaks for itself. And I think a lot of you make that mistake because you're like, here's the evidence, and then you kind of leave it to the reader to figure out how it relates to your claim. You have to be extremely explicit, okay? And that's what your line of reasoning is, okay? You are linking the evidence to the claim, okay? And you have that really thorough explanation. If you do that well, your voice is going to shine through. So this is not something, the voice part is not something that you'll have to do explicitly if you do these things above it really, really well. Your voice will just come through naturally, okay? And then again, the sources completely or fully support the claim. And then again, the biggie is that the commentary explains what the relevance and the credibility of those sources are, okay? And so then this document just ends with a little checklist that you can use for yourself. I would focus less on the checklist, and I would focus again on the things up here. What differentiates a high scoring paper from a low paper? And then focus on those bullet points that I mentioned as I went through this, okay? So I'm gonna upload this document along with the links to those 2 web pages, these pages here that you can use for finding phrases that will help you. I really think that the two links will really help you with your phrasing. I know a lot of you really want to sound academic, and that's great because this paper should have a very formal air to it. So just make sure that when you're using academic phrases and using academic jargon, that you're using the ones that are relevant, okay? And that you are using the ones that mean the things that you say they mean. So I'll post both of those links as well. All right, so let me stop here and I will now answer any of your questions. So if you have a question, turn your mic on, and now is the time to ask it. Go ahead.
Okay, so how do you analyze each evidence if it's supposed to say the same thing.
If what?
Like, you know how you said the evidence is supposed to say the same thing in multiple pieces of evidence? How do you analyze it then if
So
they're all saying the same thing?
So there are going to be nuances about every article, every study. Not every study that you find or every thing is going to be exactly the same, and you're going to need to explain what those nuances are. Like maybe one study used a larger participant group, okay, and maybe that makes it more credible, or maybe it makes it less credible. Okay, maybe one study was conducted and didn't have an adequate control group or something. Okay, so that might be things that you want to mention. Okay, but generally speaking, without getting too repetitious, yes, you are going to need to explain how all of your evidence, either individually or collectively, if you want, how it relates back to your claim. And so maybe, like you said, David, maybe you have two studies that basically say the same thing. Okay, so then within the same paragraph, you can discuss those two studies simultaneously, and you can explain how they both relate back to whatever your claim is, okay? So you can do them, you can combine evidence and talk about how it relates back together, because maybe you do have a couple of studies that both come to the same conclusions, and that's fine. So then talk about it collectively, as opposed to doing each one individually, okay?
Okay, yeah. And then how do you relate the evidence back to the claim without explicitly saying this relates back to my claim by, or something like that?
Well, so that is kind of the million-dollar question, right? There are a few different ways, okay, that you can do that. Obviously, you want to do it as seamlessly as you can. And that, I mean, I hate to not actually answer the question, but that's really going to be up to you, because there really isn't any specific answer to that, okay? It's all going to depend on what kind of paper you're writing. It's all going to depend on your own style. There isn't like a magic formula where you can do that. What I would advise you to do is to do it as seamlessly as you can. Okay, look at the studies that you're reading, because every research study that you're going to pull up is almost certainly going to be based on a previous study or information that is already out there, and those research studies are going to be making claims as well. So look in those studies and see how the authors of those studies related their evidence back to the claim that they made. Okay, just look for models, because the honest answer is that there isn't one specific way, unfortunately, to do that. It's just going to be up to you as the author to figure out how you want to do that. Okay. Okay. Other questions? No? Okay. All right. So then we'll go ahead and get ready to end the call. I will post both of those links in just a couple of minutes, as well as that file for you, so that you can use all three of those things as you're working on your revisions this week. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me before Tuesday. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Tuesday. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.